My guest today is the creator of Remarkable Inns.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. My name is Matt and I am your host. This is the show where we learn how to become better game masters and better role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. It is my privilege to bring you a new, interesting, fascinating guest each and every Wednesday. Make sure you are subscribed to the DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show so you never miss an episode. Now, I have a really great show for you today. Let's just jump into the interview. My guest today is the founder of LoreSmyth, Chris van der Linden. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, hello.
Let's just start with, when did you play your first role-playing games?
Wow, that's quite some time ago. I'm 39 years old, and I guess I started playing D&D around 15, 16 years old. At the time, we didn't really know what we were doing. We just found it really cool. Very, very cool books. So, the years after, we kind of figured out that there were some rules to the game, etc. But I think it was, around 16 years old, maybe.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I was 9 the first time I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't think I followed any of the rules until I was 17. So it's no problem there.
Right.
From there, did you play other games besides Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh yeah, I've always been a big wargaming fan. So I did like a ton of Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40K. I really like painting miniatures and building my own terrain. Nowadays, it's really a struggle to find the time to do that kind of stuff, but I still have tons and tons of cool-looking miniatures, and I've always enjoyed, hanging around the gaming stores where people are hobby building or playing the hobby. So that was always a lot of fun. And I remember playing Hero Quest quite a bit. That I've always thought was a great mix of board gaming and role playing. So I've done many things. I don't consider myself a huge board gaming fan at all. A lot of the really large, elaborate board games I find I don't have the patience for. I think I'm really more of a sucker for great storytelling and just having a good time. So a lot of like these really hardcore board games that you see on Kickstarter, I really don't have the stamina for that kind of thing.
Is it the storytelling kind of aspect that separates tabletop role-playing games from board games for you? Well,
I guess everybody's opinion differs. There's a lot of role players I know that really think the rules are super important, and they're fans of certain rule systems or against other rule systems. So each to their own. It is a game, so I kind of accept that you need rules to sort of guide everyone to have an enjoyable experience. But for me, I think what I enjoy the most is just a great storytelling and having a great experience together. Kind of like going on a holiday and then you come back and think back years later, wow, that was a great experience, when we were there in the mountains. And to me, role-playing is a lot about that. When you look back a year later, you've kind of all recall, being in that one dungeon or facing off against that character. And the rules are just there, to make it into a game. But to me, I always find the story and the memories are the most exciting thing.
I absolutely agree. I can remember playing different sessions, back now years and decades ago when I was a teenager and when I was younger, and just looking back on those with fond memories and just having the shared experience with friends, I think is it's just powerful, even though, I won't remember the time I played Monopoly with somebody or something like that, but I still remember the times I played Dungeons and Dragons with people.
Yeah, that's very true. I totally agree. And not to downplay the value or the fun of other games. I play games with my kids all the time, but it's just a different, usually a lot of times it's more about the competition, or with my young kids, about learning the different colors or shapes. That's there's just a different way and different stuff to get out of playing the games.
Yeah, absolutely. Your love, though, of role-playing games have taken you into making it a career. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess you can say so.
Okay. And could you explain a little bit, what is LoreSmyth?
Right. Well, LoreSmyth basically is me. Essentially, it's a single-person operated company. Mm-hmm. So I'm both the founder and the guy that, up till this point, used to do it all. So I kind of dreamed up the products, got the products designed and made, all the way up to do-it-yourself, Kickstarter fulfillment. In more recent months, I've started to hire some staff part-time to help me out with just the day-to-day operations, managing customer support, because things started growing, taking more serious. But I'm still a very, very small company. So the majority of the work is still done by me. And I started in 2016, I guess, more or less as a hobby. And at that time, I certainly didn't think like this is going to be my career. At the time, I still had a day job at another company that I'd co-founded. And, role-playing was really a hobby. And yeah, again, I didn't, at that time, I didn't see it like it would be my something that I earn a living with.
That's almost similar to how I started. I started in 2015 as well, and it was a hobby, but now it's my full-time job. No, that's just interesting. So I guess, this is probably an obvious question since you started doing this, but what are your thoughts on kind of the ease of self-publishing these days?
Well, I think regardless of the role-playing industry, in almost any industry these days, you kind of have all the tools at your disposal to be a company, to self-publish, be it music, art, software, can be anything. Like 10 years ago and earlier, it was already difficult to develop a website, to have a website. And nowadays, it's, a couple of clicks and you can have a website or a fully integrated web store. So I think in all industries, technological advancements and new business models, online commerce, it's all made it a lot easier for people to get into it. And again, that's also the difficulty, because so many people can do it. It's also hard, to stand out from the crowd and get noticed, to carve out your little space in it all. But it definitely, there's really very few barriers to get going and to get something out. So that's an exciting prospect for everyone, I think.
I guess what type of RPG products does LoreSmyth focus on then?
For me, and this has kind of been an ongoing journey, when I started out, my first product was an adventure, The Claws of Madness. And since then, the type of product that I want to make has changed. And that has all to do with growing as a company, figuring out what sells, what my audience likes, what they don't like, what type of product I like making. So recently, I've gotten more and more into system neutral products. For example, the Remarkable Inns book has been really successful. And I think in large part it has to do because it's an inspirational book. It's like an idea cookbook for dungeon masters, but it's for any fantasy game. So, I think realizing that I like storytelling so much, like we touched on at the beginning, I kind of find myself moving away from rule-based products more and more. Also, my Dungeon Discoveries card decks are just idea generation machines. And they don't care about what rule set you're playing in. It's just to give, you as a dungeon master a ton of ideas to take into your next session. So I think the LoreSmyth products are very much all about helping dungeon masters tell stories or get ideas for their stories, for their role-playing sessions. And I think that's one way that I'm able to stand out from the crowd, like I touched on, because a lot of people are putting out like 5th edition products or more monster books. And, I could make the same products, but I'm trying to go into a different direction so as to stand out and do what I like.
That's kind of the philosophy that I follow as well with my books that I self-publish. Now, could you tell us a little bit more about Remarkable Inns? You mentioned a little bit about that it doesn't really focus on rules, and it's more of a kind of a cookbook or a toolkit for dungeon masters. But can you tell us, like, what would we expect to find in there?
Yeah, the Remarkable Inns book is really a collection of ideas, basically taking a somewhat of a cliche, like the tavern that adventure started, and but then opening that up and showing what more can be done with such a cliche. So it takes a very narrow concept and then shows you that there's like a lot of things that you can do with taverns. It contains several pre-written taverns. It contains a lot of new items, menu items like drinks and dishes, minor magical items, all that kind of stuff, NPCs, story ideas, rumors. So it's really just a lot of stuff that you can sort of take and put into your gaming sessions or put into your world. And at the time, I didn't expect it to do so well. It was just a fun idea. But people really seem to like that it's system neutral, but also, just the type of content, like the special dishes or drinks that you can get in the taverns, like a whole collection of special tea or special beers. And that happened to, people really happen to like that. And I've just finished kickstarting Remarkable Shops. So that's going to be the second book in the series. And people just really seem to like the format. So
then Remarkable Shops?
Yeah, it follows very similar beats to Remarkable Inns, but also takes it in different directions. So, for example, it contains a chapter for what if players want to, start open their own shop and run it. Maybe they're high-level characters and thinking about opening their own store. So it goes in a lot of new directions as well. But it takes all of the ideas that people liked from the Remarkable Inns book and then sort of runs with it.
That sounds great, because I do know, running a lot of games, you do come to a certain place and, a character or a player will say something and you'll just be like, oh, well, great. Now I need a new tavern. Oh, great. Now I need a new shop. So providing some of that, I can see definitely how that would be helpful for game masters. Right.
Yeah, that's one of the, I do a lot of surveys in my customer base to kind of see what they struggle with in their gaming sessions or what kind of products they would like to see. And, the one thing that always comes up is that it's so difficult to come up with things on the fly. Your players are doing something and all of a sudden you need to improvise like a whole new store or a tavern or a character, and that's pretty difficult. So and that's what I like with my products, is trying to help the dungeon master, either be it through a card deck or a book, so that they can just go out and grab and have something at the ready for when they need it, to make their dungeon mastering lives a little easier.
I just think it is important to realize that, especially as people have careers and families and things, it's just not viable to spend 5 or 6 hours during the week planning for a session that'll last 3 hours with my friends, because if I get 3 hours with my friends, that's all I have.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Are you currently playing?
No, unfortunately not. I tried to get a new group together, but it's proving very difficult at the moment with just, everybody has kids at my age. They all have very busy lives, very busy schedules. But I do still have hopes to get a new group together here.
When you would run a game, how would you prepare for the session? Like, maybe when you were younger, when I was younger, I was able to spend some time preparing. But how did you handle preparing for sessions when you were able to run more games?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, definitely when we were younger, we would have like tons of time. After school, you could spend a whole afternoon, entire evenings, just reading books, writing extensive scenarios and all that kind of thing. And I really love doing that. In recent years, I really enjoy preparing less and less and just getting better at running games on the fly and improvising. And for example, what I typically do is use a tool like Trello, or basically just an online tool that lets you make virtual notes or cards. And I would just have several columns with NPCs, story hooks, and all that kind of thing, just that they're ready. So I would plan like the basic beats, the most important key information or things to happen, and then I would just roll with it and see what the players are doing. And in the beginning, I found that really scary, but at one point, I felt it worked a lot better than preparing everything in great detail. Because it was just more relaxing for myself, and players, could just do whatever they want, and it would always work. So I found myself preparing less and improvising more as the years went by.
And I find that I do the exact same thing. And of course, I wrote a book called The No Prep Game Master. So that kind of just goes into a lot of the thoughts that I have on these things because, it's just less and less time. And I also found too, when I would spend a lot of time prepping a session, I would want to railroad my players. I would want to kind of jam them down a story that I was making instead of just allowing things to happen at the table and giving them more agency.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, essentially, that's also what I don't like about adventure modules is that they're sort of, very strict scenarios or movie plots in a sense. And it's great stuff for if your players follow along, but once they want to go in a different direction, you'll have to improvise anyway. So, and then it becomes a struggle to keep everyone on track or sort of get back onto the main story beat. So I found that, adventure modules, I strip them apart and just try to figure out, okay, what is the, what are the core story beats, the main motivations of characters. And then from there, it could go any way, if they want to take the long way around or the short way, or as long as I know like the three core things that need to happen in the story, it could happen in a million different ways.
As we're recording this, I've been running The Curse of Strahd from my group, and it's such a detailed book. It is excellently written and put together, and it's like 240 some pages, but every session something happens that's not covered in the book. So right. I still have to improvise something on the fly. And, what you were saying there, I just absolutely agree that even if you have a published adventure, you're still going to have to improvise somewhere along the line.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And that's the dungeon discovery card decks that I've done were exactly born just from that frustration, if you will. People saying in the surveys that, what if my players searched a room and I didn't plan for them for anything to find, but the room, it's not empty. It's not like this sterile hospital room. Mm-hmm. It's an old dungeon. It's dusty. There may be bones, like a crumbled chair, some discarded arrows. There could be anything, but coming up with that stuff is very difficult. So that's how these card decks came to life, to make it easier for the dungeon master to just pull a card and then, go like, oh, you find, some stinky old boots in the corner, it doesn't matter for the story. It's not important for the plot, but at least you have something to say when the player searched the room and you didn't plan for it. And that's the way I think about products now, is that they either need to make your dungeon mastering life a little easier or provide story ideas during preparation. But yeah, generally making it easier and fun to be the dungeon master.
And I've pretty much gone that way with random tables by creating books of random tables that people can use. There's you just always come to a time in like a session, you're in a dungeon and it just seems so unfulfilling just to say, oh, well, there's nothing in the room.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. And the players are like looking at you like nothing, like zero. And of course, well, even if it's something useless or something, it can be funny, or it can add just a little bit of, it can just make the world seem a little bit more real.
Yeah, I love random tables. It's good stuff.
Kind of going along with products like yours and mine, just the idea just behind these is just that I don't want somebody to be like, oh, well, I can't be the dungeon master because I don't have time for this. Mm-hmm. Because one thing that we need in the hobby is just more people who are willing to run games for people. And I don't know if you agree with that, but you don't have to spend all of this time. You can just sit down at the table and take a lot of the little details off your plate by using remarkable ins or something like
mm-hmm. that. Yeah, I totally agree.
Just thinking too, kind of along the lines of running games. What would just be some advice that you would tell somebody? Maybe they've never run a game before, and maybe they played a couple times, but they want to run a game, but they're intimidated by it in some way. What would you tell them?
Oh wow! Well, there's a lot of advice to be found on YouTube, internet in general. So these days, there's like great people like Matt Colville and, like yourself, putting out sort of educational material, if you will, that makes, dungeon mastering easier instead of just learning it all from the official core books, which I think are a little oblique. So I think, just have a look at YouTube. There's a lot of interesting content. I think for me, the Lazy Dungeon Master from Sly Flourish and your book, things like that definitely click with me. I was like, oh yeah. I mean, just a few sticky notes with the most important information, and maybe a Dungeon Master screen with a couple of the most used rules that I can just look at when they're needed, and that's basically all I need. I think you don't have to be so hard on yourself thinking that you need to know it all, or that you need to have it all prepped in endless detail, and just have fun. The players are there to have fun, so you should too.
And absolutely, if the game master or the dungeon master is not having fun, something's wrong, and that would need to change. I think your advice is great. That there is so much out there nowadays that learn how to do this without driving ourselves crazy or losing friends or something like that.
Well, for example, I'm not very good at the rules. I've never been good at it, and no matter how many times I read the rules on spellcasting, I always sort of tend to forget. And in the beginning, I used to worry about it because as the dungeon master, you're supposed to be the rules lawyer or whatever. But nowadays, I just see myself as needing to propel the story along. And some of the players know the rules much better, and they'll remind me, like, well, that's not really possible, or hey, shall we do it this way? And I stopped worrying about needing to remember all of the rules, and just focused a little bit more on what I was good at and what I was enjoying. And of course, every group is different. Some groups are really strict with the rules, others are more loose. But I think it definitely made a change for me when I stopped worrying about thinking that I needed to be the absolute master in everything. I just focused a little bit more on what I was good at already.
That is absolutely true. And And I used to feel that way as well. I used to feel that it's like, well, I have to know everything. But I just more and more nowadays, I will find myself, somebody says, oh, I'm going to cast this certain spell. I'll just like, what's the rule for that? I don't remember that spell. And it's just like, how does it work? And, and as long as, you're not playing with somebody who's just trying, just out to like game the whole system, which is, I find is very rare. They're just like, oh, well, the rule works like this. And you're just like, oh, okay, go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead and roll that.
I started with second and third edition. So, I mean, honestly, how was somebody expected to remember all those rules?
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Even the other night, we were playing and I can't remember exactly what it was, but a situation came up. I just asked my player, how does that work for your character? And they told me, and it's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know every single barbarian subclass or whatever, I don't know the rules for all of that. So no, I think that's great. And I think that people do just really need to kind of loosen up a little bit and realize that, we don't have to have the book memorized or whatever, but, and that there are different styles that people play the games differently at different tables. I play with people that I've known for a long time. So it is just really easy for me to talk to them and to ask them something. If we have a dispute about a rule, I mean, it doesn't turn into some like heated argument or anything like that, where we're just able to either, at last resort, we'll look it up in the book, but usually somebody at the table will know how it works and we'll get it done. I guess one thing I wanted to ask is just that since, tabletop role-playing games were your hobby and now they're becoming more and more what you do as a career, has that changed the way that you look at games? Was there anything that you learned from trying to publish products that you just didn't think of while you were playing?
Oh yeah, loads of things. And I think with every product that I make or every Kickstarter that I do, you make mistakes, big and small, and you learn from it. I think the biggest change is also kind of a cliche, but when it's a hobby, you can basically do whatever you like. Mm-hmm. Which, for example, was making an adventure module. But then when you rely on it to be your income, you also have to look at it commercially. What type of products are selling more, which is the best seller. Should I be doing more of those? Should I stop doing this type of product altogether because, it costs a lot of time, but it's not really making me much money. So all of a sudden you go from just working on whatever you like and finishing something how long it takes, and that moving to also having to look at it commercially, having deadlines or self-imposed deadlines to get products out in a timely manner. That definitely changed. If you've asked me in the beginning what type of products I would be making, I would probably say more adventure modules. And now I'm doubtful if I will make a lot more adventure modules because while I really like them for what they are, they're just not commercially very strong as opposed to remarkable inns, dungeon discoveries. So yeah, sometimes it's difficult decisions to stop doing something that you really like because it's just not sustainable business.
I have felt that as well. The first product that I had put out was a post-apocalyptic setting for the OpenD6 system. And I realized very quickly that not many people still play the OpenD6 system, and not many people want to play post-apocalyptic in that system. And it does kind of change your perception, and you do have to start thinking about what's out there, what's not out there, what people actually really want and need. So I just find that interesting as well as I'm kind of trying to grow this and turn this into a real business and things.
Yeah, some of it is educated or taking insights from afterwards in hindsight and then adjusting accordingly. Mm-hmm. Some of it is just luck, because, for example, Remarkable Inns, it was just a fun idea that I had with a little funky title, little ridiculous title, and I didn't know it was going to be the best selling product that I had up till that point, but it eclipsed everything I'd done before that. So then afterwards, you kind of go like, oh, okay, wow. So adventure module sales were okay, but this, just was like 10, 20, 30 times more. And that's when you start, taking the insights and, planning your steps forward. So I'm now at a stage where, for example, with the current products, I know which the big sellers are. So I'll try to do at least one more. But I also can't stop, coming up with new things, because eventually, you see this with games like Assassin's Creed. If there's like a new same thing every year, eventually, it kind of dilutes. So I always also have to try new things just in case I stumble upon the next hit or the next success. So I always try to sort of 50-50 balance doing stuff that I know already works. But I also want to continue coming up with new funky ideas, so as to not dry up the well or, to dilute what's already there.
I know a lot of people, I'll get questions and things about this. They'll ask, how do you break into the tabletop RPG industry? The best way to break into the industry, of course, is to self-publish your own stuff. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the single most important advice is to just get started, because, there's no end to the amount of emails or questions people saying like, I'm thinking about getting started.
Yeah.
Get started, do it, finish something, however small, and just get it out there. That's the best way to get started, to actually make something, finish it, and get it published. The biggest roadblock or the biggest stumbling point for people is to have ideas. Maybe they have a draft, but it's not finished. And as long as you have not gone through the entire cycle of going from idea to development to finalizing and publishing, you've not experienced the whole life cycle. And there's a lot to learn. So maybe you're already a good writer, but doing the layout work, the graphic work, or planning a Kickstarter, running a Kickstarter, getting something printed, getting it packaged, shipped, doing customer support, those are all separate skills that you will never learn if you're stuck in the idea phase of thinking about getting started. So the single best advice I can give is take something that you'll confidently think you can finish. So usually that's something small, and get it finished and get it published, because that gives you the opportunity to not only learn how to write, but also all of the other stuff that comes afterwards. And then after that, I could probably write a whole book about it. But after that, it doesn't really matter. Just get started and take it from there.
I think that is absolutely fantastic advice, because I'll talk to some people now, actually just recently, and I think there's this perception that they have to create a 600-page original system. And I was just like, well, what are you playing right now? And they're like, oh, I'm playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And I said, well, why don't you just create a new background for a character and publish that? And they're just kind of blown away by it. And it's just like, well, do something small and see what happens, and learn. You learn so much, through the process. Like I said, I published my one book called Anarchy. The post-apocalyptic one doesn't really have a market for it, but it taught me how to publish a book, and it taught me how to think about what people want and what they need while they're playing their role-playing games.
Yeah. I think there's a distinction between, being self-published or being a writer. If you go down the avenue of being a writer and have somebody else or another company taking your work and publishing it, marketing it, then it's fine with just being a good writer. But if you want to self-publish, you kind of have to do it all. It's like being in a band these days. Like 10, 20 years ago, it was okay to be a musician and record a demo, and then you'd send it off to the record labels and they do everything else. But these days you need to, get your own shows booked, promote your shows, sell merchandise, be your own promoter, be your own record label. And then if you're already successful, a bigger record label will, say, now you're interesting to me. So I think the cool thing about self-publishing is that, again, you have the opportunity to get to learn all of these other skills, and that will make you into an entrepreneur, like a well-rounded entrepreneur. And that's the difference between just being a writer or being a self-published writer, basically an entrepreneur. So I guess people will have to choose if they think or if they like the idea of being an entrepreneur, everything else that comes with it, or just only the writing part.
I definitely think that is important for people to understand, and that also that it's important for people to understand that a lot of tabletop role-playing game companies, you will find out, are 1 or 2 or 3 people that are actually working there, and there is no job there,
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of break into the industry, if that is actually something that is really important to you, that self-publishing is, I think, the surest entry, because once something is out there, people know what you're capable of, and until then, they just don't. And it's not,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that they don't like you or something like that. They just don't know who you are, and they don't know what kind of work you're capable of.
Yeah. Getting something published, getting it out there, that's already a big accomplishment in itself, because a lot of people never actually finish anything and see it all the way through. So, yeah.
Finish things. That's the biggest. I think that's the biggest takeaway. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Where can people go to learn more about you and your products?
Well, they can go to my website, LoreSmyth.com. I have a Discord channel, which is quite small yet, but people can go there. Usually I'm online when I'm at work. Just, you can hit me up to chat or, do random voice calls. I'm all for that. But yeah, LoreSmyth.com, the website. We also have a Twitter and a Facebook page. I guess people can check that out.
Okay, and I will make sure that I link up to your website and to all your social media in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com, so everybody can find that really easily. So Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Chris. As I mentioned, I have provided links to all of his products and his website in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So you should head over there and check those out. Also, if you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You will get 10 free dungeon maps, plus some other RPG resources that you can use in your campaigns, all for free, and you will never miss an episode of this show. Now, hey guys, if you enjoy this podcast, please consider heading over to patreon.com/dicegeeks and consider supporting the show financially. It takes a lot of effort and time and money to produce these episodes, and I am striving to get better and better each and every week. So the more people that support me on Patreon just lets me know that I should keep making these episodes and keep producing the dicegeeks.com tabletop RPG show. There are some amazing goals that are available to all the supporters. So please head over to patreon.com/dicegeeks. Check out the different goals. The future holds some exciting stuff. So I thank you for listening today. And until next time, keep gaming.